Today is March the 6th, 2019. Welcome to the Personal Computer Show. I'm Hank Key and my colleague is Joe King. Do you know who has your personal data? Do you know how Facebook, Google, and Amazon are using your personal data? Is that product that you bought from Amazon a counterfeit? You should find out. Our website is pcradioshow.org, and we can be heard each Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on prn.fm, streaming on the internet, as well as on various podcast hosting sites. Podcasts of the programs available on prn.fm, on the internet, and pcradioshow.org. To listen to the live program on the telephone each Wednesday, it's 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and the number is 641-793-7091. For those who are listening to the program on demand, you can leave us a message with your question or comment to hank@pcradioshow.org. You can also reach us on the Google number 862-800-6805. That's 862-800-6805. Start your message with The Personal Computer Show, followed by your message. Passwords. Then there's facial recognition and fingerprint readers. How am I going to get around all that? Well, the web just took a big step toward a password-free future. The World Wide Web Consortium approved of web authentication, and they have shortened it to WEBAUTHN, or WebAuthn. I don't know how they're going to pronounce that. It's a new authentication standard that aims to replace the password as a way of securing your online accounts. First announced last year, web authentication is already supported by most browsers, including Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Safari. Its publication as an official web standard should pave the way for wider adoption by individual websites. Web authentication is an API that allows websites to communicate with security device to let a user log into their service. This security device can simply plug into a USB port on your computer to a more complex biometric device that allows for an additional level of verification. The important thing is that web authentication is more secure than the weak passwords people end up using for most websites, and it's simpler than having to remember a string of characters in the first place. Now that a standard has been approved, the next step is for websites to integrate the standard. Dropbox was one of the first to do so last year, and Microsoft did so soon after. Since mid-2016, a group of security professionals and researchers from across the industry have been working on a new way to handle authentication and proving one's identity on the internet without the help of passwords. The new standard known as web authentication is a credential management API that will be built directly into popular web browsers. It allows users to register and authenticate with web applications using an authenticator such as a smartphone or hardware security keys or trusted platform module devices. This means that devices like a cell phone or a TPM, which is a trusted platform module device, where a user can provide with biometric verification, we can use web authentication to replace traditional passwords. Aside from user verification, we can also confirm user presence. So if users have a U2F token like a YubiKey, that can be used as a second factor of authentication through Web Authentication API as well. While web authentication is fairly new, it is heavily based on relatively old API standard called UAF, or it stands for Universal Authentication Factor. The specification for UAF fell short in some ways, and it seems like there was never a real push to have this necessary functionality added to major browsers, so developers that wanted to implement it were tasked with working around the lack of native support. Unlike its predecessor, web authentication should be here to stay. Although the fine points of the specs are complete, web authentication has been fairly easy to implement in practice. At the time of writing, Both Chrome and Firefox have the data types necessary for web authentication, and Firefox Nightly Build is able to create and request credentials. What does all this mean for passwords? The big thing that web authentication wants to provide is biometric multi-factor authentication based on something a user is. A user has a voice, a fingerprint, and a retina that is unique to them. Something that most users also have nowadays is a biometric device like a smartphone that can use this data to create and manage credentials that only the user can access through these unique traits. Since your cell phone is much better at making and storing passwords than you are, we can replace the standard website password using the web authentication spec. It is built with this in mind as its core feature, but currently only supports the physical method of two-factor authentication, since no cell phones currently support web authentication. So don't start deleting your passwords yet, because web authentication still needs a bit of work. While it looks like the web authentication API should be available on Firefox and Chrome in the coming months, when cell phones begin to support web authentication requests, it should be quick to switch over support to user verification. I am looking forward to it because I can't remember all those passwords, and now we can get rid of all those sticky notes on the monitor with all the passwords to every browser entry there is. Do you remember the Y2K bug scare? Well, here's a quick refresher for those who might have forgotten about it. Many people believed that computer systems were going to go haywire at the start of the year 2000 due to how they handled dates. In the early days of computing, software was programmed to abbreviate years in double digits. So 1984 became just 84, to save, at that time, precious memory space. Many people feared that computers may misinterpret the year 2000 as 1900, causing systems that rely on precise date records to crash and burn. Thankfully, the Y2K bug came and it went, and the whole world didn't exactly go up in flames. Now, something similar is about to happen to GPS units worldwide, and the question is this: are we prepared for it? The 2019 GPS week rollover and the great big eyes in the sky known as Global Positioning System, that's GPS, not only tells you how to get to the nearest Starbucks, it also supplies precise timing information called Coordinated Universal Time, otherwise abbreviated as UTC, to critical systems including communications and power grids. Aside from that, GPS also transmits accurate dates and times to receivers by providing them with the current week and the number of seconds we are into the week. The receiver will then translate these figures into a more readable month, day, year, and time of day format. Well, now here's the problem. These timestamps are encoded in a 10-bit field, and therefore the week number can only accommodate up to 1,024 integer values. This means that every 1,024 weeks, or around 20 years, the week counter has to be reset back to 0 and work its way back to 1023 all over again. The very first GPS week started on January the 6th, 1980. Then the first rollover occurred 1,024 weeks later on August the 21st, 1999. This means that this year on April the 6th, 2019, the counter will hit its 1,024th week again, and it will need to be reset back to 0. You probably know where this is headed, right? Sure, this could mean trouble if a GPS receiver is not programmed or patched to handle the rollover. Since GPS requires accurate timing to determine precise locations, because a nanosecond error in time equals 1 foot in position error, not only will your GPS receiver display the wrong date and time, it will output the wrong coordinates too. This could cause headaches for older data and navigation systems that rely on GPS for accurate timing and location. Are we all doomed? Not really. This all sounds scary, but should you be concerned though, Will it be great catastrophe or will it be just a fizzle out as Y2K did in 1999? Well, if you have a GPS unit that was built after 2010 or a GPS receiver that has received firmware updates in the last 10 to 15 years, then you'll be fine. Thankfully, manufacturers of GPS gadgets have prepared for a 2019 GPS Week rollover, and it's likely that most modern GPS systems conform to the compatible GPS 200 standard. However, there's still a possibility that your GPS unit will misinterpret the rollover and turn back its clock to January the 6th, 1980. So come April the 6th, you got to make sure that your GPS is displaying the correct time. If it's saying that you're suddenly back in the 1980s, no, you're not going to go like Marty McFly at 88 miles per hour. All it probably needs is a firmware update. The Department of Homeland Security guidelines for the rover is as follows. To ensure that critical systems that rely on GPS won't be affected by the 2019 rollover, DHS has these recommendations for the operators of such equipment. Investigate and understand their possible dependencies on GPS for obtaining UTC. Contact the GPS manufacturer devices that they use to obtain UTC to A. Understand the manufacturer's preparedness for the April 6, 2019 rollover, and B. Understand the actions required by critical infrastructure and other owners and operators to ensure proper operation through April the 6, 2019 rollover, and ensure that firmware of such devices is up to date. Well, if your equipment was purchased before 2010, go check your equipment and go check it with the retailer you bought it from. Hopefully they're still in business. There is the anecdotal fact, there is the statistical fact, and there's the fact to fit the narrative. Google pay equity analysis leads to raises for thousands of men. What? That's very different from what we've been hearing. A 2017 lawsuit that 3 women filed against Google in 2017 accused Google of underpaying women. The New York Times reports a result of an analysis of the data was Google's pay structure found that the company otherwise be underpaying men relative to their peers. The analysis also led to raises for some women. Google determined annual pay raises in 3-phase process. First, Google adjusts every employee's compensation based on standard factors like their location, seniority, and performance ratings. Managers can then seek additional discretionary raises for their best-performing employees. Finally, Google performs a company-wide analysis to determine whether these raises are based in terms of race or gender. If biases are detected, the disadvantaged workers are given additional raises to eliminate the discrepancies. Google provided $9.7 million in adjustments to a total of 10,677 Google employees based on the results of the equity analysis. Google said it was important to be consistent in following through on the finding of its analysis, even when the results were unexpected. In recent years, there have been a lot of concerns in Silicon Valley about the opposite problem, women being systemically underpaid relative to their male colleagues. Of course, it's possible that Google's statistical analysis doesn't capture all factors that could be biasing pay structure against women. Google's analysis aimed to identify employees who are underpaid relative to others in the same job level. But what if the process of assigning employees to job levels itself is biased? That's the premise of a 2017 lawsuit 3 women filed against Google, charging Google had channeled and segregated and continues to channel and segregate women on the basis of their sex into lower compensation levels and into less compensated and less favorable job ladders and levels. The Department of Labor has also raised concerns about Google's hiring and promotion practices. Google has rejected these charges. If Google managers were promoting men more quickly than equally qualified women, that discrepancy wouldn't necessarily get picked up by statistical analysis that takes employees' job levels as a given. Google says it plans to study the company's hiring and promotional processes to make sure that the company encourages gender equality. There is data, and there is statistical data, and there is data to fit the narrative. Amazon is abandoning huge office space in downtown Seattle after they had ditched plans for a second headquarters in New York. Amazon has opted to abandon a massive office space in downtown Seattle just weeks after dropping plans for a major campus in New York. Fresh off ditching its plans for a major campus in New York, Amazon has also opted to abandon a prominent retail building in downtown Seattle. The move comes 10 months after the online retail giant threatened to pull out of their lease if the city voted to implement a new business tax. The Seattle City Council last year was mulling a tax on larger employers as a means to fund affordable housing and homeless services, according to the Seattle Times. And while local officials ultimately reversed themselves on the measure, Amazon confirmed that it would be subleasing its 30 floors in the 58-story building located in Rainier Square. The company is, however, resuming construction on a building nearby, a project previously paused out of concern for the potential tax. The lease, one of the biggest in Seattle history, was for about 722,000 square feet, enough space to house between 3,500 to 5,000 employees. Apple, Dropbox, and Oracle were all reportedly eyeing the space on 4th and Union Streets. An Amazon spokesperson said the company is always evaluating the space requirements and intend to sublease Rainier Square based on current plans. The company added it has more than 9,000 open jobs and 2 million square feet of new space under construction in Seattle, and that it will continue to evaluate future growth. On Valentine's Day, Amazon announced it would no longer build its second headquarters in Queens after pushback from activists and some politicians, many of who were critical of tax breaks the company would receive. The new headquarters was expected to bring some 25,000 jobs in New York, all of which now will be dispersed across several other cities with already existing Amazon hubs. Scheduled to open next year, the $570 million Rainier Square Tower project is slated to be the second tallest building in the Pacific Northwest. Listen, it's all a business. We have an example of going from the sublime to the ridiculous, which was coined by Tom Paine in The Age of Reason. When was the last time you protested a drastic price cut? If you did, it had to be a temporary aberration. This happened last week. Tesla owners literally protested over drastic price cuts. Tesla announced that it was finally selling a long-promised $35,000 Model 3. In addition to that price reduction, the company also cut the starting price of its Model S and Model X vehicles by $12,000 to $18,000, and other versions of the vehicles saw their prices decrease by up to $18,000. Tesla's price cut have been so significant in some regions that it devaluated some recently purchased vehicles by over 40%, and it pushed some owners to literally organize protests. When launching the base Model 3 and changing its sales strategy to online only last week, Tesla also made some significant price and option changes to its Model S and Model X lineup, which included a new Model S battery pack and of some up to $12,000 massive price changes in the United States. Tesla has been justifying those price reductions by saying that the shift to online sales is going to result in cost savings. Overseas, the price reductions are even more significant. In some markets, the higher-end versions of the Model S and Model X have seen overnight price reductions of over $30,000. One of those markets is Taiwan, where the price of the Model S P100D was cut almost in half by Tesla's latest price changes, resulting in about $100,000 in savings. It angered some owners so much that they organized protests in Tesla stores and superchargers. In China, the price reductions have been quite significant, and indignation over the decision started trending on Weibo, which is China's Twitter. It made it into the Chinese media. Some of them went so far to protest in front of Tesla stores and installing signs on the windows. If you have a drastic cut in price, this is also reflected in the reduction in the tariff of the import of the product. The price and drop affects the luster of a luxury item for the chosen elite in China and Taiwan. Other Tesla fans, however, are defending the company, saying that price reductions are always good regardless of how they are being introduced. Actually, we have had very wealthy people in the United States complain that their taxes are low. Hey, there's no law that says you cannot overpay your taxes. As price of electronics have been dropping, disk storage arrays, which have been in large corporations, are now available for small business owners and the small home office. In instances where you have to recover data because of operational failure during the day, the delay to restore backup data may not be a viable option. Storage disk arrays now have the ability to give you redundancy features which are built into them, which would enable you to more efficiently continue processing.
Technology in the workplace. It's abundant. This is Benjamin Rockwell, and now I'm going to take some time to put on my work hat, and I'm going to talk about those things that you might hear about the office, and you're not really sure what they mean, what the deeper aspects of this are. So today I'm addressing the world of the IT professional and RAID, not the bug spray. RAID? No. What I'm talking about is a redundant array of independent disks, RAID. And what this is a way for us to increase speed or give us fault tolerance, or another word is redundancy. Basically, the ability for the system to keep working without us fixing anything, without us having to go to backups. So let's start off with the simplest form of RAID, and that is RAID 0. All right, now RAID 0 gives us the ability to bring in information twice as fast. Imagine it like this. You've got a book open in front of you. You have 2 pages. Well, we have 2 disks in the system. Now imagine normally we would read down the page on the left, and then we would read down the page on the right. What if you could read down as fast as normal both pages at the same time? And you could include that information into your brain, input it into your brain twice as fast as you currently do. Well, that's what we're doing with RAID 0. We can put the information from both of those hard drives, from page 1 and page 2, into the system twice as fast. Great idea. Now, let's go to the next level. What if we want not speed, but we want redundancy? So we've got page 1 on the left, and we've got page 1 reprinted on the right. And then we make notes and we make changes on both pages at the same time. That is RAID 1. Now, what does that allow us to do? Well, we can compare back and forth. We're looking at page 1 on both the left and the right. If anything is changed, if anything isn't matched, we can sit here and we can sort it out and we can solve that. There's a lot of different stuff that's included in there. And the great thing about that is it is reliable. This is very crucial when we're talking about we want this information to survive. Now, the next level of RAID, and we're going to skip a few, and I'm just going to go to RAID 5. Now, RAID 5 adds in 1 additional drive or more. You can have a number of different drives. And now we've got page 1. When you think about it, we're going to move to separate individual pages. So we've got page 1, page 2, and page 3. They're all sitting on a table in front of us. Page 1 has all of the information that we would normally see on page 1. Page 2 has all of the information that we would normally see on page 2. So there's your left page and your right page. Page 3 has a mathematical formula that's been figured out, and it is basically tabulating And it's a very simple formula of adding the information from page 1 and page 2 together to provide page 3. So you've got 1 plus 1 equals 2. Now, what happens if we lose page 1 altogether? Well, all we know is the number that's there on page 2, that's a 1, and we know the end of the calculation, which is 2. Well, 2 minus 1 is 1. That means that we can recreate all of the information that was on page 1 by having page 2 and page 3. Now, what's exciting about this is in a system that has RAID 5, any one of those drives can fail, and boom, it's fine. It gives us a little alert, a little notice that, hey, you got to fix this. But all of the information is still there. We don't have to back up anything or restore anything. We just have to fix the problem before it becomes any worse. Now, there are additional levels of RAID. This is just kind of a high-level overview to give you kind of an idea of how the IT professional has to deal with some of these things. This is Benjamin Rockwell. Back to you, Hank.
Thank you, Benjamin. Today there is software and, well, there is software. There are different classes of software. There is proprietary software. There is public domain software. There is open source software. There is free software, and there is freeware software. Are they the same? No, not really. What is proprietary software? Proprietary software, such as Microsoft Office, Google Docs, or iWork from Apple, users cannot study, change, and share the source code. An end-user legal agreement, otherwise known as EULA, E-U-L-A, is a legal contract between the manufacturer and or the author and the end user of an application. The EULA details how the software can and cannot be used and any restrictions that the manufacturer imposes. For example, most EULAs of proprietary software prohibits the user from sharing the software with anyone else. Not every EULA is the same. Software as a service is a software licensing and delivery model in which software is licensed on a subscription basis and is centrally hosted. It is sometimes referred to as on-demand software. Software as a service is a software licensing, SaaS, is typically accessed by users with a thin client via a web browser. Well, what is public domain software? A classic example is the original first web browser, World Wide Web. No, that's not the name that you're familiar with, and that's the reason why they changed the name of World Wide Web, the first browser, to Nexus. There's also Tor, T-O-R, which is an acronym for the Onion Router. It's a browser that contains everything you need to safely browse the internet. The Tor software protects you by bouncing your communications around a distributed network of relays run by volunteers all around the world. It prevents somebody watching your internet connection from learning what sites you visit. It prevents the sites you visit from learning your physical location, and it lets you access sites which are blocked. Tor browser lets you use Tor on Microsoft Windows, Apple Mac OS, or Linux without needing to install any software. It can run off a USB flash drive and is self-contained, and it's available in portable format. It is software that has been placed in the public domain. In other words, there is absolutely no ownership such as copyright or trademark. Public domain software refers to any program that is not copyrighted, and public domain software is free and can be used without restrictions. The term public domain refers to creative material that are not protected by intellectual property laws such as copyright, trademark, or patent laws. The public owns these works, not an individual author or artist. Anyone can use a public domain work without obtaining permission, but no one can ever own it. Well, how do I figure out if something is copyright protected or public domain? You can start by looking at the date. Anything made before 1923, no matter what, will be definitely in the public domain. What is open source software? Examples are OpenOffice, LibreOffice, Android, Linux, WordPress, Firefox, and KeePass. Open source software is software with source code that is publicly available under a license that gives users the right to study, change, and distribute the software as they wish. The term was coined in 1998 when a group of individuals pushed for a title that was less ambiguous than free software. They changed the emphasis from freedom to security. The term is more palatable for the corporate world, even though it refers largely to the same software. Like free software, open source software can be distributed, but it doesn't have to be. Free software is by no means a new term. The phrase was coined by Richard Stallman in the 1980s when he started the GNU project to create a free operating system and founded the Free Software Foundation to advocate on behalf of free software. The phrase refers to software that users can safely run, adapt, and redistribute without legal restraint. The Free Software Foundation provides these 4 essential freedoms that software must respect in order to be considered free. The freedom to run the program for any purpose. The freedom to study how the program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish. The freedom to redistribute copies so you can help your neighbor. And the freedom to distribute copies of your modified version to others. The Foundation created the GNU General Public License, commonly referred to as GPL, as a copyleft license that developers can distribute the software under to qualify it as free and ensure that it stays that way. So, open source software is free software? Yes and no. Software available under the GPL generally qualifies both as free software and open source software. If you use a Linux distribution, most of what you get through your package manager satisfies both sets of requirements. Chrome OS by Google, which is Android, are open source projects, but they don't satisfy the 4 freedoms necessary to be considered free software. The growth of these 2 platforms lend weight to the argument that changes were needed to make free software acceptable within the corporate world. Android is now the most popular mobile operating system and can be found in everything from refrigerators to watches. Open source software, in which source code is released under a license in which the copyright holder grants users the right to study, change, and distribute the software to anyone for any purpose. Open source software may be developed in a collaborative, public manner. There are many terms out there that all refers to software that doesn't cost money, and many of them sound roughly the same. Open source sounds straightforward enough, but what's the difference between free software and freeware? And why do these labels seem to matter so much? That's because regardless of how they sound, they all refer to very different things. Open source applications are not under public domain, and this allows people to freely use their works. Open source software does have copyrights. Sometimes the term open source is used interchangeably with public domain software, but they're not the same thing. Software copyright is the extension of copyright laws to machine-readable software. Software copyright is used by software developers and proprietary software companies to prevent the unauthorized copying of their software. Free and open source licenses also rely on copyright law to enforce their terms. Free and open source software refers unsurprisingly to software that is both free and open source. The term is the closest thing to a compromise between the 2 models. It's worth noting, however, that any software that qualifies as free software could also be considered free and open source software, so the situation remains, well, a little bit ambiguous. So what is freeware? Unlike free software and open software, freeware does not refer to or emphasize freedom in any way, nor does it have a clear definition. In general, freeware is software that is available at no cost. Such software is still generally closed source or proprietary, such as Adobe Reader and Skype. Why does all this matter? Anyone could produce code and release it to the public without a license, but such a model is not sustainable on a wider scale. Adopting a free or open source license applies legal protection to code, preventing others from taking free code and repackaging it as their own, restricting others from using it again, and for those of us who care about software freedom on either a philosophical or pragmatic level, it is important that we understand the progress that has been made by the giants who got it all started. A common question I receive is, what programming language should I learn? While none of these programming languages should come as a surprise to insiders, with an eye on the latest tech hiring trends, the key insight to know is that companies are seeking out talent versed in at least 2 to 4 of these languages. Given the fact that none of the top 25 Fortune 500 companies rely on only one language, and instead rely on a minimum of 4 for business needs, tech professionals with proven expertise in a variety of these languages will be the most sought-after programming talent in 2019. Well, the most in-demand programming language for 2019 is, in the following descending order: Java, Python, C++, C#, C, JavaScript, and PHP. Well, I spoke to my son and he says that's not quite the list he sees because there are many different lists. So what I did was, well, let's go to the open source and find out who contributes the most material and what language they write in. More than half the developers are contributing to open source projects according to DigitalOcean report. 20 years after the open source movement began, developers are increasingly contributing to these projects, but employers are expecting even more participation according to a report from DigitalOcean. Just over half, 55% survey for the report, said they are contributing to open source projects. However, 71% said their companies expect them to use open source software as part of their day-to-day development work. For the developers who do participate in open source projects, the majority, 60%, contribute on the software side. And the top motivation for this participation is improving coding skills, along with being part of a community and learning new technologies. Here are the 10 top programming languages developers said they use most for open source projects. Top one with 62% participation is JavaScript. Python has a 52% participation. PHP 29%. Java 28%. CSS 25%. C++ 18%. Go 16%. C 14%. C# 10%. And in 10th place, Ruby 9%. I looked at the average median salary for all 10 programming language. They're all within the $10,000 range, so there's really not a great difference knowing one language over another. This list largely mirrors other data on the most popular programming languages to learn in general. And I did a little more research about what companies contribute to the open source forum. New data debunks several myths around which companies lead in open source contributions. A new analysis by Adobe puts Microsoft into a whole other universe of contributions. Back in October 2017, it was determined which companies were most generously contributing to open source projects. Microsoft came out on top in terms of total contributors compared to second place Google, while Google topped the charts in terms of actual code pushed to repositories compared to Microsoft. But that list really actually now should be updated. And using the 2017 data, Microsoft has twice the number of employees contributing to the open source forum. Google is right behind with half of the number of employees contributing, and Red Hat is about the same. However, IBM, which is slightly behind in fourth place, when you combine that with Red Hat, they're right on Microsoft's tail in terms of contributions of material to the open source forum. Actually, many of the large tech companies do participate in the open source forum. The other contributors are Intel, Amazon, SAP, ThoughtWorks, Alibaba, GitHub, Facebook, Tencent, Pivotal, EPAM Systems, Baidu, Mozilla, Oracle, Unity Technologies, Uber, Yandex, Shopify, LinkedIn, SUSE, ESRI, Apple, Salesforce, VMware, Adobe Systems, and in the 30th place is Cisco Systems. Microsoft having twice the number of contributors of its next nearest competitor, Google, and for those of us that were around when Microsoft castigated open source as a cancer and anti-American, this is a remarkable change of business model. Meanwhile, Amazon, so often snubbed as an open source ne'er-do-well, comes in at number 6 in the ranking with close to 900 contributors. Amazon has perhaps not worn open source on its sleeve in quite the same manner as Google and Microsoft have, but it remains a strong contributor to the projects that feed its developer community. Other takeaways: Chinese companies like Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba, which have long been perceived to be net consumers of open source, actually contribute quite a bit. Well, that brings up another topic because there is another programming language, and it's been around a long time, since the early 1960s. I asked the question, is COBOL still in use? COBOL is primarily used in business, finance, and administrative systems for companies and government. COBOL is still widely used in legacy applications deployed on mainframe computers, such as large-scale batch and transaction processing jobs. Most programming in COBOL is now purely in maintenance existing applications. Does that mean that COBOL is obsolete or on the way to be obsolete? No, not at all. It is not obsolete to date, and it cannot be made obsolete for at least another 10 to 15 years. Still, more than 100 billion of lines of COBOL code are present. Most of Fortune 500 companies are still using mainframes for their operations, and COBOL is the primary programming language in mainframe. Well, are COBOL programmers still in demand? The answer is yes. COBOL, or Common Business Oriented Language, is a programming language used to write code for software. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the job outlook for computer programmers is declining in COBOL, but COBOL programming is still needed for businesses. Many businesses across the world still find COBOL programming useful, so it's beneficial to learn COBOL. COBOL programming is still an in-demand skill, particularly for programmers that want to work for government agencies, banks, and other business organizations. And the national salary average for COBOL programs, not all that different from the other programming languages that I just reviewed. Daylight savings time returns in the wee hours of this coming Sunday morning. Replace those smoke detector batteries, and Marty has some other corners of the house that might need some daylight saving timely attention too. Spring forward, Marty. Let us know.
Once a year, daylight savings time begins, and once a year, daylight savings time ends. Each time, it kicks our perception of what time it is first up, then down by an hour. If you don't pay attention, it can make you get places too early or too late. If you don't pay attention to those shifts, it can lead to inconvenience and embarrassment. I can't help you with having an artificially maladjusted clock. My point today is that next Sunday's daylight savings time adjustment is a perfect hinge for swinging into a look at other things that need to happen twice a year. You know, like seeing your dentist, checking or just plain replacing the smoke detector batteries, changing the filters in the HVAC system, that kind of thing. Now, I could give you some huge long list of every little chore you should attend to twice a year, but I have to tell you, I hate hearing those lists, so I'm not about to foist one upon you. Instead, let me suggest one or two things that never get on those lists. Maybe, just maybe, it's a long shot, I know, but just maybe I'll inspire you. Please remember, my overall purpose here in these early 2019 segments is to prepare you for a series of little home retrofit projects on the theme of the number 40. First, because I'm hoping they can help you cut your energy costs to about 40% of what they have been. And second, because I hope at least some of these projects provide ways to let expensive repairs get pushed off far into the future, maybe as long as 40 years. 40%, 40 years. So let's start with those energy bills. Maybe all the utility bills, electricity, gas, water, phones, TV, internet, things like that. Those guys send you a new bill every month. I think it's smart, at least twice a year, to compare what you pay now to what your bills were a year ago. Lots of things can change those bills, right? If the only changes are things you know about and things you control, well, that's fine. But little changes in a house can creep up on you and make those bills climb in ways you may not notice until you look. If your thermal windows start gapping, that can cost you a lot. Ditto if your ventilation ducts aren't breathing the way they should. Is there a slow leak in a water pipe somewhere? These little things are things that you might never notice unless you're really looking for them. And these kinds of little things can ambush your cash on hand. That's why checking your bills twice a year. What an idea, right? Check your bills twice a year, and that may give you the first hint of things working against you. Well, speaking about bad things sneaking up on you, let your computer's antivirus software run a full and deep scan of your system at least twice a year, if not more often. And twice a year, break out the blowers and the vacuums and purge your computers and workspace and TV sets of all the dust and dust bunnies they've been fostering and growing. Dust, blow, vacuum. Get at all 6 outside sides of everything and get inside when you can get at the insides. But before you do, turn the power off and unplug for safety. Twice a year, check the dates on the medicines in your house. Look up the safe way to dispose of the old ones. There's probably a local hospital or a pharmacist who may know about where unused medicines can get disposed, or if you can't learn about those local options there, do an online search. A moment ago, I mentioned smoke detector batteries, but those aren't the only ones you should check, or save a step and just replace. Get to the batteries in, you ready, smart thermostats, in flashlights, in the radios you may want to have around during power failures, in clocks, in clock radios, and in those 100,000 smart home sensors and hubs and gizmos, maybe even in the doorbell. Your UPS system, your backup power system, is likely to have a self-test mode. Run it. Okay, let's shift from juice to water. Go to every toilet, even the ones you almost never use, and check the water level in the bowl. Too low a level means a problem. A leak around the base means a problem. Flush that toilet. A refill that doesn't stop means a problem. While you're there, check the faucets in the sinks and bathtubs and showers. Make sure they deliver water, and then, when you turn them off, that they turn off completely. No drips. Look for rust spots around the faucets, under the faucets, and at the drain. Smell. Take a big sniff. If it smells like a sewer, that can be a big problem. Check your lights and light switches. Flick the switches on and off, listening for sparks or arcs. You know what they're like. Does the switch feel warm to the touch? That's the first sign of a potentially dangerous problem. As for the lights, if the bulbs aren't already LED bulbs, replace them with LED bulbs. Got a car? Check the tire pressure. Do a penny test on the tread depth. Check and see when an oil change is due or if it's past due. If you have a vacuum that can reach the car, use it. Back indoors, head for the pantry. Those boxes of cereal have use-by dates. Dump the past tense boxes. Hit the freezer. Frozen meat and other frozen things, I know a lot of you will find this unbelievable, but they don't stay good forever just because they're frozen. Look up the date on the label that tells you when they were packaged. Search online for how long, max, you should save them. Then do something about it. Oh, and don't forget to spring forward. That is the point of daylight savings time after all, to make sure that you and I and Hank and everybody else loses an hour of sleep next Sunday. I probably don't need to say this, but don't forget about manually adjusting the clocks you have that don't automatically adjust for daylight savings time. Next time, I face the strange task of trying to connect the dots between circles and leprechauns and, again, your house. No, it won't be the circumference of a pot of gold or the diameter of a rainbow, but beyond that, hey, no promises.
Thank you, Marty. Public service announcements. TCF, the Trenton Computer Festival, is Saturday, March the 23rd. The hours of the festival are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. TCF is a one-day festival held at the College of New Jersey campus in Ewing Township, New Jersey, covering computing and electronic technology. For more information, visit the website tcf-nj.org. Computer club meetings in the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut tri-state region. The computer clubs have random access sessions at each of these club meetings. If you have any questions or need for technical advice, the club members are more than happy to assist. There is no such thing as a dumb question. The Westchester PC Users Group has a meeting Thursday, March the 7th. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Keller Williams Realty, 120 Bloomingdale Road, White Plains, New York. The Long Island Macintosh Users Group has a meeting on Friday, March the 8th. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Harry J. Schur Hall, New York Institute of Technology, Old Westbury campus, out in Old Westbury, New York. The Kings Bite Computer Club meets Tuesday, March the 12th. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Park Plaza Restaurant, 220 Cadman Plaza West in Brooklyn, New York. The New York Amateur Computer Club will have a meeting on Thursday, March the 14th. Meeting time is 7 p.m. NYU, 32 Waverly Place, Silver Building, room 414 in Manhattan, New York, and photo ID is required for entry. Princeton PC Users Group has a presentation on cutting the cord. Thursday, March the 26th. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Mercer County Library in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. The Brookdale Computer User Group has a presentation, Cut the Cord, Things to Consider Before Firing Your Cable Company. Thursday, March the 28th. Meeting time is 6:45 p.m., and they meet at the Middletown Library Lodge Community Room at 55 New Monmouth Road in Middletown, New Jersey. The Danbury Area Computer Society will meet Tuesday, April the 2nd, 7:30 p.m., and they have a new meeting place, Danbury Hackerspace, 158 Main Street, Danbury, Connecticut. The Amateur Computer Group of New Jersey has their meeting on Friday, April the 5th. Meeting time is 8 p.m., and they meet at the Scotch Plains Rescue Squad, 1916 Bartle Avenue in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. The Computer Learning Center at Ewing has a presentation on Apple seeds and Apple devices. Thursday, April the 11th. Meeting time is 2 p.m., and they meet at the Ewing Senior and Community Center, room 205-999, Lower Ferry Road, New Jersey. These meetings are open to the public, and there is no charge to attend. If you have a computer club meeting you want me to announce on the air, send me a note. My address is hank@pcradioshow.org. Our website is pcradioshow.org. We can be heard each Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on prn.fm, on the Internet, and podcasts are available from all major pod hosting sites, as well as on our website, pcradioshow.org. If you have any questions for us or commentary on any of our feature segments, just send us your email address with your telephone number, in which we can call you at a convenient hour for playback on the program. If you have any questions for us, just send us an email addressed to hank@pcradioshow.org. There is no such thing as a stupid question. In the meantime, stay in touch and keep on computing, and remember to back up. I'm Hank Key, and on behalf of Joe King and Michael Horowitz, we thank you for listening. Stay safe and healthy. Until we meet again, same time, same station next week.